Hello, welcome back to Buckle Up. My name is Rob Wilson and this is the KGM Torres. And today I'm going to find out, can it really be worth £35,000? Right, I'm going to start as we usually do at the front, and wow, there is a lot to talk about here. KGM used to be Ssangyong, Ssangyong is gone, KGM is here. This is their first car since the total rebrand, and it's a bit of a combination of everything that I can think of off-roady wise. So we've got these vertical strakes in the grille here, which are very reminiscent of Jeep, except there's only 6 of these and there's 7 on a Jeep. You've got these daytime running lights that go up and around into the side of the car, which sort of remind me of the pattern of earlier Discovery Sports. And then it's just really chunky and off-roady. You've got big fog lights down here. You've got a massive brush guard down here at the bottom, a big blacked out matte section here with your grille in it. You've got Torres written here on the front, and then down here this is sort of a carryover from other previously Ssangyong models. I remember the Tivoli having something similar to this for your towing eye cover. But yeah, it's definitely very bluff, SUV-ish, angry, mean looking. It looks like it means business off-road. But let's go and have a look at the side, because there's a few more off-roady details going on there. Right, here at the side, the off-roady details do indeed continue, because we've got these chunky tie-down points, which you would only usually see on the really tough, proper off-roaders. I'm thinking Ford Bronco and the like in the US. Now, here, these are plastic. They're not really going to do anything. They're more for show, but if you did have proper ones, like a lot of American trucks have, you could have a lighting rig up there on the top, and you would use these for tying that down, keeping it in place. But yes, these are not proper. Do not do anything with these. There are 2 trim levels on the Torres right now, a K30 and a K40. This is the K40, which is the higher of the 2 specs, and that means I've got 20-inch alloy wheels. On the 30, you only get 18-inch wheels. You've got big plastic cladding around the wheel arches here. You've got some covers here with the indicators on the wing mirrors. And then you've got this big chunky roof bar here up on the top, which is finished in black, and you can actually put 75 kilos on the roof if you want to. Then further down, you've got this sort of blade, silver blade here that breaks up the glass of this car a bit, makes it a little bit reminiscent of, I guess, old Defender, Discovery 2. These sort of things are coming to mind here. It's definitely taken inspiration from a lot of off-road vehicles. But what that does mean is there's obviously no glass here, so we'll have to see if that affects visibility when we're inside. But right now, we'll go to the back and see what's going on there. Right, here at the back, and there's a couple of very interesting styling decisions, including the main thing being this fake wheel cover. I think that's what they're trying to emulate. A lot of off-roaders would have a spare tyre here on the back that would be exposed or covered if it was a very posh one, but this one is just here for styling purposes. There is no spare wheel attachment, there is no spare wheel in this design at all, but it does have the Torres script again proudly displayed across the back. Your number plate is underneath that down there, and again a lot of off-roady features. We've got these big chunky rear lights that have got this complex 3D design to them. Again, very reminiscent of other off-roaders that I've seen. Big scuff plate down here again. And then here we've got the KGM badge, not with the wings of the Ssangyong logo, which is what it technically is, just written out its initials here. You've got your fixed rear wiper, and then your handle is actually here, so you think, oh no, it's going to be side hinged and it's going to be really awkward when I'm in a parking space. But what actually happens if I click this button hidden within the handle is it opens vertically like a normal boot, which I wasn't expecting when I saw the pictures of this car. Now, in here is really the Torres' party piece, because we've got 700 litres of space with the seats in place, and if you fold those rear seats down, that increases to 1,662 litres, which is an awful lot. KGM are very proud of the fact that they say this is class leading boot space, and I would have to agree with them, because that is an enormous boot. Under the floor there are a couple of pouches in here where you can stick stuff before you get further back, and then you've got your safety equipment like your warning triangle and your tyre inflation kit. No spare tyre in here either, so that might be a little disappointing for some, but it's a nice wide opening. There's a completely flat floor. You can remove this if you want to, but you're not really going to gain much in the way of space under it. There's some big pouches down here on either side as well. I've got my walking boots in this one so they don't rattle around while I've been using this car this week. Nice big parcel shelf, and that's sort of it, because there aren't really any tie down bits. You do get a light, but that's it. But what I'll do now is I'll close all this up, go and sit in the back seats and see if I fit, because I'm quite tall. Right, in here in the back, and first things first, do I fit? Well, yes. I am 6'2" or 188 centimeters tall, and this driver's seat is currently set up in my driver's position, and as you can see, I have a little bit of knee room here, which is always good, and I've got plenty of headroom, which isn't always the case. And then in terms of features back here, well, we've got some seat back pockets on both of the front seats. I've got some air conditioning vents here in the back, although I do not have the power to control the temperature back here. You just have to deal with what the front passengers want. There is a charging outlet here with 2 USB-C charging points, and there's a little shelf for sticking things on down there. You've also got on this top spec model heated rear seats, which is controllable by this button on the door. You've got some nice rear blinds, which you can pop up here nice and easily if you've got a young baby child in the back that's sun sensitive. You can when I say easy. You've got some really big door pockets down here, which can easily fit some big bottles of water, probably 2 in each of those. I've got an armrest here in the middle which folds down, and that's got another 2 cup holders in it, which is always nice to see. And then both of these outer seats have got Isofix on them, so that makes it nice and easy for fitting a child seat. There's only one real sort of problem with the space back here, and that's there is a small hump in the floor, but because the footwells are quite big, you're not necessarily going to be fighting for foot or leg room if you had 3 people in the back. I wouldn't suggest it for a long drive, but it's certainly doable on shorter ones. But what I think I'll do now is hop up front and see what's going on there. Okay then, so up here, I think the first thing to talk about is the design choices that they've made in this new KGM Torres. So we've got a lot of rose gold copper. I don't know what you would call it, but it's that colour material on the dashboard, around the gear selector here. You've got that same colour stitching throughout the design in this cabin as well, which I do really like. I think it lifts the cabin. It's way better than it just being completely grey or black. And it actually feels quite nice. It's an interesting material. Material choices generally up here, soft on the tops of the doors. This is soft on the top of the dashboard. This is where it starts to get a bit scratchy when you go further down, but most of the stuff that you touch is reasonably okay. I'm not quite sure if it's 35 to 40,000 pound okay, but it's a lot nicer than we've seen in previous Ssangyong products like the Tivoli or the Corando, so it's a markup there. This steering wheel is big. It's quite enormous, but it's quite thin. It's got a flat bottom, which is slightly sporty, and then on it you have various different controls for things. So on this side you've got most of your stuff for controlling the audio and radio and all of that stuff, and then on this side is your cruise control functions. Now this is the first Ssangyong / KGM product to have adaptive cruise control. Now that's only standard on the top spec K40 version, which I'm driving now, but that is an incredibly welcome thing to see, because the old Ssangyong products just used to have old-fashioned cruise control where you just set the speed and the car goes that speed. It wouldn't follow the car in front at a safe distance and do all of that for you. So this makes driving on motorways, long journeys, so much easier. I've done a couple of long journeys in this so far this week, and it has made it so much easier. It's also got auto steer, so when you're on the motorway it will keep you in the lane. There are a couple of points where it's not as slick as other systems that we've used in the past. It's got I think it maybe just needs dialing in a little bit more. It's not the worst system that I've used by any stretch, but there's been a couple of points where it just shouts at you and beeps and does all of those annoying things that modern cars do, but you can't really penalise it for that because every car sort of does that now, but it could be a little bit more slick. Down here we have your aircon vents. Everything, unfortunately, is controlled through the screen. You've got these two big screens in front of you that are joined. They are separate displays though. One is for your driver information. You can calibrate it to show different things. You can have a full map up on here, a bit like Audi's virtual cockpit if you really want to. And then this screen is where you control everything else. So your climate controls are in there. You can do your Apple CarPlay and Android Auto onto that screen as well, which I've been using fairly flawlessly this week, which has been good to see, because not all the systems are that good, and it's actually reasonably responsive as well, surprisingly so. So when you did have to go into it and change the temperature, it wasn't laggy and annoying and you didn't end up hitting the wrong button. So that was quite good. In terms of practicality, there's quite a lot. The door bins, again, are enormous. You can fit multiple bottles of water and various other things in these door pockets. That's really good. You've got this big tray down here under this plinth where the gear selector is and the cup holders are, which again is really useful. There's a little shelf here, there's a little cubby here you can stick your phone in. There's also another cubby here that you can stick your phone in, which acts as a wireless charger. Your phone slots in there, and then this armrest lifts up, revealing a bin area, which is actually quite deep and usable if you want to carry some stuff up front. The glove box is a decent size as well. It's full width, and you've got the owner's manual and various other things in there, which is always great to see. Also down here you've got some USB chargers, and you can plug your phone in here for doing the screen stuff, and there's a 12-volt socket as well. But that's generally my thoughts here on the interior, so I think what we'll do now is head out onto the road and go and drive it. Right, so driving the KGM Torres out on the road, and I think the best place to start is just by talking about some of the statistics. So we've got a 1.5 litre petrol engine, and if you've watched my video on the Tivoli, which is the smaller sibling of the Torres, that has exactly the same engine as this. Now, it's only available with a 6-speed automatic gearbox, and that's the problem, because the gearbox, as I discussed when driving the Tivoli, is not the most sophisticated one I've ever come across, and could well be one of the least sophisticated ones I've ever come across. It's very slow to respond. When you accelerate, it's like a good couple of seconds before much happens, and that can catch you out at junctions or roundabouts, or places you don't actually expect to be caught out. So if I was going to change anything on this car, it would be the gearbox. But what I would suggest you do is you go and drive one, because if you drive one and you're happy with it, that's absolutely fine, because there isn't much else that's really wrong with the car. It's perfectly fine at doing most things. It's very quiet when you're driving along most of the time. If you do push your foot down and wait for the gearbox to do something, the engine does get a little loud, but it does that in a lot of cars. The problem that I've got, or the main other problem that I've got with the drivetrain currently, is you can get it with front wheel drive, which is what this one is, or you can get it with all wheel drive, but that's coming, and all of the stats and figures around that haven't actually been confirmed yet. But I would have thought, because it's front wheel drive, it's got a reasonably, it's got an engine that is similar to rivals in terms of size of litres. I'm thinking of the Volkswagen Tiguan, for example. That does have hybrid assistance, or mild hybrid assistance, and that car can do 40-50 miles to the gallon. This car on WLTP is only rated at 28 miles to the gallon. 28 on WLTP tests. That is not good enough when you're comparing it to rivals, because, as I say, they can get at least 50% more MPG when you're not driving them particularly frugally, basically. And it does seem to do that sort of 28 miles to the gallon when you're, even if you're doing long distance driving on motorways, it wasn't really getting much more than the low 30s, which is not brilliant. But that's the negatives. Let's talk about some of the specs. So we've got that 1.5 litre engine. It's got 163 PS, which is actually quite good, more than some of its rivals. A lot are around the 140, 150 mark. This has got a little bit more power than those ones. It's also got 280 Newton meters of torque, which is a decent amount. And despite the looks from the outside, it doesn't actually weigh that much in this front wheel drive, guys. It's around 1.5 tons, so there isn't that much mass to actually move about. And that plays into, when you're driving it, it doesn't feel heavy, but I think that's probably helped by the fact that the steering's quite numb and a little light. There's not really any feeling or communication coming from it, but I wouldn't really expect that in a car that's this sort of size and in this class, because they're not sports cars, are they? They're just crossovers, because this really can't be classed as an off-roader. And I think that's really where this car is aiming itself at. It's got the looks of big off-roaders, but it doesn't have the drivetrain or performance to back up its looks. So it could potentially be disappointing if you're expecting it to be a Land Rover rival. It isn't. It's more in the vein of other family crossovers like Skoda's Kodiaq, VW Tiguan, Peugeot 3008. That sort of bracket we're looking at here. It's just a different take on it exterior wise, but underneath it's the same sort of recipe. It's just front wheel drive right now. Obviously the all wheel drive one will make a big difference, so once that's available, we'll definitely be testing that to see what it's like, because then that does start to make sense. And I've been talking about how much this car costs at the start. I said £35,000. That's the entry level price for the K30 version. This K40 version is actually a lot more than that. It's £38,000 starting, and then you've got to pick your paint options and stuff on top of that. You do get pretty much everything as standard, so that's good. You're not paying for additional features, but really, that's, you know, it's not even like I can say, oh, but at least it's cheaper than its rivals, because you can get all of those cars that I've mentioned for that price or less with similar engine specs that will be more fuel efficient. But none of them look like this car. And that's the thing I'm going to keep coming back to, because I think that is the USP of the Torres. So at least it's got that going in its favour. Although it's more powerful than some of its rivals as standard, because, as I mentioned, the gearbox is a bit slow, it doesn't actually feel that fast when you put your foot down. There is when the engine starts to go. But that means that things like the 0 to 60, which I know aren't that relevant, but, you know, if you are pulling out onto a 60 mile an hour road from a junction, you do sort of need to take those things into account. And this is just less than 11 seconds. And that really, for the amount of power that it's got, isn't as fast as you would necessarily expect. You definitely expect it to be less than 10 seconds. That might not bother you. And if it doesn't, that's fine. But I have to look at this compared to its rivals and assess it compared to those cars. And right now, it doesn't meet the expectations that other cars have in this class. And this class is so competitive now. It's got so many different, like every manufacturer basically, mainstream manufacturer, has a car in this space. And they're all pretty decent. I wouldn't own any of them because I don't like this class of car particularly. But I could be swayed by how this car looks. Because I think if you look at something like the new Tiguan, it does look a bit like an anonymous blob. It doesn't look like an SUV. This looks really good. I do like how this looks. People have been looking at this car and then looking at the badge and going, KGM, what's that? But that's besides the point. It's getting looks, it's turning heads, it's doing what I think you have to do if you're a new brand in this space, because even Ssangyong doesn't really ring that many bells inside people's heads. Oh, what's Ssangyong? I haven't heard of that. But KGM, no one has heard of that. So I think they've done a good job of using the looks to get people interested in it. And I think that when that all-wheel drive one comes out, that's where it might make the most sense for a lot of people. The other thing to remember is there is an electric version of this coming as well. And my colleague, Harry, will be testing that one very soon. So subscribe to the channel if you're interested in that. That's called the EVX, and that uses BYD batteries as well. So it should be reasonable on the old mileage. But what I think I'll do now is head back, go and do a bit of a conclusion and see what we think. Right then, that is the KGM Torres tested, and I think, as I've alluded to throughout the video, is it worth £35,000 or £38,000 or £40,000 if you go for the all-wheel drive one? I think you have to be very, very interested in how this car looks rather than the substance of what's underneath it to be interested in paying that amount right now for a brand new one. I think if there's some good deals out there on them, and they're already starting to appear, even though this is a brand new car, some good finance deals, then yes, it's definitely worth a look at. I think it looks really good. I think it's got an absolutely enormous amount of practicality in terms of its boot size and space inside the cabin. It's just let down a little bit by the engines, the drivetrain, the gearbox especially is not the best. So if you can live with those things, or if you want an SUV that looks like an SUV but has a little engine and isn't that damaging to the environment and you're not bothered about it being all-wheel drive, this could suit you really well. So Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, comment down below. Let me know what you think of the Torres, because I'm genuinely really interested to hear what you think, because this is brand new, you know, Ssangyong's gone. What is this brand going to be? This is the basis for it. But most importantly, please do subscribe to the channel and turn notifications on so you never miss an upload. And if you want to support what we do, you can look down in the description and find places to follow us on social media. You can buy some merch, or you can become a channel member and get some exclusive behind the scenes videos. But thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.